Hi, I'm Bungalow Bill, and welcome back to From the Depths. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 ways to balance a craft, and I've talked about stability before. This time, we won't be talking about something useful like aligning thrust and drag, or something, dare I say, nerdy like PIDs. We'll be looking at 3 useless ways to balance a vehicle, and possibly make an attempt at making some of those useful. So here's the test vehicle that I've built, and it is not in fact stable. So I'll address this in 3 different ways, and show them off one after the other. Excellent! The craft is now standing up, and it's doing so with a clampy foot. So let's talk about feet briefly. In From the Depths, there are 2 types of feet. There's the sticky foot, and there's the clampy foot. So the sticky foot was the original version of a foot in From the Depths. It would apply a force downwards to the ground, as well as provide some amount of friction. And you could technically build a walker with these. Later they put the clampy foot in, and that's what I'm using here. The clampy foot can provide friction forwards, backwards, left and right, but it can also provide torque. So this one's providing a small amount of yaw torque to keep it pointing in a specific direction, as well as some pitch and roll torque to keep it upright on this terrain. So even though I can go and turn the friction clamps off, it is not actually going to help us here. So ideally, I don't want this just to be balanced, I want it to move, and I'm not interested in actually building a walker. And the reason I'm not interested in building a walker is that in From the Depths, gravity is extraordinarily weak, and the atmosphere is quite thick. Now, in theory, clampy feet could get around this by providing downforce, but they're really not strong enough to overcome it. So walking in From the Depths is like walking underwater. It might be a good way to get exercise, but it is not a good way to get from point A to point B. So here I just put in this very small thruster, and I'll set it going just a little bit. So now with 20 thrust at an altitude of about 8 meters over the foot, it's creating a very small amount of torque. And this is using 30% of the pitch torque from this foot to overcome, and the foot is clamped, so it's not sliding around. No matter what I do with this thruster, it will not slide around until the foot actually detaches. And this means that if I put this up to 0.3, this will just about get to the point of overcoming the pitch torque. So it hasn't overcome it yet. 60 thrust at a distance of 8 meters. Turn this up a little bit higher, and this should do it. So that's all the clamping force that a clampy foot has, and it doesn't help me in what I'm trying to do here, which is create something that can actually move productively. Okay, here's another way to balance the vehicle. So it's standing up on 2 wheels, just like some very odd vehicles in real life do. And similarly, I gave this an odd name. I decided to call it the Segu. I have no idea what that means, but I saw the word online somewhere. It's staying up through an incredibly simple breadboard that translates a forward motion input into an angle that it intends to stand at, and it'll move the wheels forward and backwards to attempt to get into that angle. If I go ahead and tell it to go somewhere, its movement commands are currently off, which is why it's standing upright. If I actually put it into its movement routine, it'll lean forwards and yaw towards the directed target. I have it set for a 30-degree lean angle, which is about the best I could maintain without it falling on its face, due to the slow response time of wheels in this game. Unfortunately, this is a similar issue to walkers. The gravity is incredibly poor, and the air resistance is incredibly high, which means that ground friction-based transportation with any reasonable frictional coefficient, like anything that you'd see in real life, like 0.5 to 2, roughly in that range, is what rubber gets on various terrains. That's just not good enough to move you forwards. To really overcome air resistance in this game, and make it even slightly like real life, you need frictional coefficients like 10 or 20, and they just didn't give them to wheels in this game. A large part of the reason that wheels aren't that viable, but not the only one. So unfortunately, short of putting thrusters on this, there's no way I can really get it to go faster. I could get a little bit more speed by pushing the angle of lean slightly further, but not a whole lot. And if I put thrusters on this, I might as well make a plane. So let's look at the third and final way of retaining balance. Here we have the final way I'm going to show off of balancing a craft. These are reaction wheels, and reaction wheels are fairly well known and fairly seldom used. They are used in real life as well, also fairly rarely, but unlike real life, the reaction wheels in From the Depths work pretty differently. In real life, you put a torque into a reaction wheel, and you experience an equal and opposite torque as a response, and that can allow you to balance a vehicle. And From the Depths, if you notice, these are just spinning at a constant rate, and this craft is leaning slightly, and they're counteracting that lean. In real life, they should have to continually spin faster and faster to counteract that lean, and the only way that they could spin back down would be if it leaned the craft back in the opposite direction, so that it could slowly start spinning the wheels back down to tilt it in the opposite direction and bring it back to neutral. So the From the Depths reaction wheels, you get a torque out of a spin block that depends on the mass that you have on the other side and the speed that the spin block is turning at. Unlike real life, where it's the change in the rotational speed that matters. Additionally, while From the Depths does have gyroscopic precession for the craft as a whole, if you get a craft spinning very fast, as far as I can tell, it will proceed. It is a little difficult to really tell very scientifically, but as far as I can tell, it does proceed. Spin blocks don't. And if you want to know what I mean, you can either look up a physics video on YouTube or look at a video of a BattleBot with a vertical spinner. Minotaur is a pretty good example because that will very often go up on one wheel, often intentionally. So, although I wasn't able to get this to drive with wheels, I did put a jet engine so we can compare it to the clampy foot. And this jet engine I can just slowly spin up, and we're really already doing better than the clampy foot. 200 thrust, we're still running good. Something else I should point out, you can use motor drive on spin blocks. Reaction wheels don't require any motor drive, but you can put in motor drive to get a little bit more damage out of rams or that sort of thing. Increasing it does not give you more torque out of a reaction wheel, so there's no reason to do it. We're at 400 thrust now. We're starting to get some decent speed out of the spin blocks. Unfortunately, it tells you max rotational speed in degrees and rotation in radians, which is really not the most useful thing for them to do. So we can counteract 500 thrust. We are starting to have the angle of the vehicle be an actual contributing factor, though, because as this mass gets further out, it starts to drag the vehicle down harder and harder, and we do have a substantial mass here where we didn't before. So this is still well below what one thruster can put out, and it takes up a lot of space. So it was worth about 30 engine power at around this distance on a jet engine. Granted, again, the jet engine did have a little bit of help from gravity, but yeah, it can't actually right the vehicle either. But not a great showing for it. So this is why reaction wheels don't get used that much in practice. And From the Depths, they're just not that strong. It also looks like it broke gravity. Never mind, here it goes. I thought I hit caps lock, but apparently I didn't. or hit caps lock again to drop the vehicle. I did do some testing before this, and I broke gravity several times where I would exit build mode and my vehicle wouldn't fall. But we're seeing why they're not used that often. They do have a little bit more usefulness, maybe if you want to make an unpowered vehicle, or you want to make a satellite where instead of jet engines you're comparing these to ion thrusters. They still don't compare that well though. So, not used the most. You can make them wholly internal to the vehicle though, so that is an advantage. Now, let's see if I can actually go and use some of these principles in practice and make something mildly useful as a result. And here we have it, the ultimate in ship stability. I call her the grief shark. I believe I finally made something practical with my Segu technology. So currently she's just set to balance in place. I initially wanted her to be built on pistons, but I was having issues with the reduced collision detection that comes from putting wheels on pistons. So currently she's just setting at an angle of 1. Let's allow her up to 5 to move forwards. Truly revolutionary. I believe I've improved upon the reef shark. Oh, you thought it couldn't be done. You thought I was mad, but I have done it. So ultimately, the wheels don't have enough friction. They don't produce... Rather, with all this weight, they should have enough friction, but there's just not enough drive force to balance a craft this large. I would have really loved if it was possible to build a version of the Reef Shark like this that balanced simply by having wheels at the bottom. Unfortunately, when she tilts forward and back, you only get one wheel on at a time. It's possible some enterprising person could put a spin block at the bottom that would angle the wheels depending on the angle the ship's at, keep them all in contact. Maybe I'll try that. I think I'll run into issues with the reduced hit detection again. When I was using pistons, I was having issues with a lot of bouncing. Maybe I'll give that a quick spin and see if it does anything. I've done it, boys. Here's the Grief Shark 2.0. She's willing to rake up to 20 degrees forward. I could still go for the piston strategy to allow some depth control to go into deeper or shallower water, but I think she's pretty good the way that she is. This is actually a pretty reasonable top speed. Now we're going almost 40 meters per second. Relatively low power consumption, all things considered. She is on God mode. Well, it was going well. Still some bugs to be worked out, obviously, but, you know, all things considered, pretty effective craft. Anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you in the future.